Picture this. It's the early 1990s in Jamaica. Mesh marinas, Clarks, Kangal hats, baggy jeans, them thing that run the streets. West Indies in its golden age, Bojo running the charts. But the economy? Well, it's kind of like a Jenga tower with too many pieces pulled out. And most people didn't even see the red flags. And you might be wondering, how did things get so bad in the 90s? Sit tight. I'll explain to you after the intro. So what were the signs? You remember this graph from Prime Minister Andrew Holness's budget presentation recently? My initial reaction to the 1990 and 2000s was a total shock, and it piqued my interest. Why was it such a standout period for inflation? What did it mean for the people living under these conditions? I did some digging, but before I tell you what I found, if you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you'll be the first to be notified when a new video drops. Let's start by looking at the financial sector. The 1990s was a crucial turning point for Jamaica's economic history. Imagine you have a cousin that keep on borrow money from you, and when it's time to pay it back, it's bare excuses. That was Jamaica to the IMF. And by 1984, Jamaica would have long out them hand to IMF like 6 times already for financial assistance. But this time was different. In 1984, the government led by Prime Minister Edward Seaga went back to the IMF and said, "Boss, let me a thing now. My account dry and I need some money to spend." And the IMF say, "No say nothing further, brother. Me know your style already and me not in a hit with you this time." I mean, you can't blame them. Jamaica had external debt of over 200% of the country's gross national income and no USD reserves for international transactions. The IMF decided that if it were to lend Jamaica money again, it would only be under certain conditions. It's safe to say that the main condition was that Jamaica must remove the peg to the US dollar. At the time, I think it was about 8 Jamaican dollars to 1 USD. Seaga's government and the IMF had a fiscal standoff that lasted for years over this, Both entities wanted to make the economy more modernized and take advantage of the wave of globalization happening, but there were opposing views on how to do it. The IMF wanted to remove the peg on the US dollar and move away from a fixed exchange rate, making the market decide the value of the currency. The Jamaican government wanted to keep the fixed exchange rate and gradually devalue the currency over time. Seaga argued that devaluation would lead to higher inflation, increased interest rates, and greater costs for servicing external debt, all of which could exacerbate poverty and social unrest. He believed that maintaining a pegged exchange rate would provide economic stability, lower inflation, and foster investor confidence. Well, there was a change in government in 1989, and the back and forth with Uncle IMF was over. Michael Manley was now Prime Minister and the Honorable PJ Patterson, his Finance Minister. By the way, Gilbert was them time, not true? Anyway, under pressure from the IMF and the World Bank, the new government started to liberalize and deregulate its financial sector to encourage economic growth and attract investments under what is called the Washington Consensus. So what did that look like in real terms? Well, in September 1990, the government transitioned from a fixed exchange rate to a market-determined system, the very thing that Seaga didn't want. They also made structural adjustments to policies, including the reduction of state intervention in the economy, the promotion of private sector growth, and austerity measures in public sector spending. New banks start popping up left and right. Insurance companies, investment firms start popping up like dancehall rhythms. The Jamaican dollar moved from about 6 to 1 in 1990 to about 25 to 1 in 1992. Causing very high inflation in a short span of time. So everybody who had US dollar debt saw their balance owed increase 4x. I mean, the goal was to stabilize the economy, reduce inflation, and create a foundation for sustainable growth. But here's the problem. Freedom without oversight equals chaos. Think of it like this. Imagine if a bunch of people suddenly got their driver's license, but there were no traffic laws, there were no police officers. People would be speeding, crashing, running the red lights all over the place, right? That's basically what happened in the financial sector. Everybody was zooming ahead, setting up banks, handing out loans, and investing like they were in a Wall Street movie. They took huge risks with people's savings, like investing in volatile real estate projects or lending to companies with no proven track record. And the people who were supposed to be watching over the financial system, well, they didn't have the tools or the power or the controls in place to stop the risky moves or the shady business. So bad loans and bad behavior ran wild. There were no strong regulatory framework to ensure the new players were being careful. Around the early to mid 90s, the high inflation rate consequently caused the government of Jamaica to take anti-inflationary measures to control inflation and protect the Jamaican dollar from further devaluation. PJ Patterson took over as Prime Minister in 92 after Manley retired, and his government implemented new legislation to strengthen and restructure the country's financial system. One thing he did was raise interest rates. And we're not talking about the cute 0.5% interest bumps like we see today. We're talking 40 or even sometimes 50% interest rates. Imagine you borrowed money when the interest rates were low, thinking you're good, then bam, interest rates shoot up. Your loan payments are going to triple or even 4x. Mortgages ballooned, causing a lot of people to lose their homes. Businesses couldn't keep up with the cost of borrowing, so them lock up shop. That's what happened to hundreds of businesses and thousands of people. And the banks were left with a mountain of IOUs and no cash. People got nervous and started pulling their money out of banks. And once the withdrawal started, it was like a domino effect. Banks couldn't keep up, and by about 96, the whole system was in crisis. It was a weak and vulnerable house of cards ready to fall to the ground. The weak and overexposed institutions started to collapse first. They couldn't survive because their risky loans weren't being repaid, their investments tanked, and they had no safety nets. There was a severe liquidity and solvency crisis on our hands. Banks like the Eagle Group, Citizen Bank, Century Group, Blaze Investments, and other entities who borrowed heavily in US dollars went under, along with thousands of other small businesses. People lost savings, some even took their own lives due to the pressure they came under. Imagine thinking dying is better than dealing with the loss of your hard-earned money and or the mounting debt payments. Some experts argue that it was the act of removing the fixed exchange rate by the then government that further weakened the economy and the act of raising the interest rates that caused the financial collapse. But then Minister of Finance Omar Davis defended his government's move to raise the interest rates, stating that other countries with relatively low interest rates suffered similar fates. I don't know, which side do you blame for the collapse? Let me know what you think in the comments. To rescue the sector and to provide a solid foundation for return to a healthy financial environment, the government had to take decisive action. An important new government body was quickly formed. On January 29, 1997, FINSAC Limited, or the Financial Sector Adjustment Company Limited, was established. FINSAC was created to both recapitalize and restructure the institutions that failed in the meltdown and to restore what could be restored. FINSAC needed to negotiate with the 150 to 200 financial institutions that it assisted before hammering out final agreements in court with the creditors and the shareholders of those troubled institutions. Where FINSAC purchased a company's assets or capital, it usually paid for them in government guaranteed bonds. By the end of it, FINSAC acquired some $79 billion of non-performing loans, along with other assets like real estate, often at face value, meaning the shareholders of those failed institutions were paid in full, bailed out by the government, and sailed off into the sunset. Together with the initial payment from a private company that it sold the loans to and earlier recoveries it made by itself, FINSAC received about 35% of its loan portfolio's $33 billion face value, or 15% of its value when including interest. It got another $15 billion from the sale of real estate. Some said them sell off real estate at a fraction of their values to cash-rich investors. Critics say that instead of bringing economic stability, FINSAC's effort led in large measure to wipe out and flash sale to overseas investors. We see reports that the whole operation cost the Jamaican economy over $120 billion, or 40% of GDP. The debt taken on by the Jamaican government that couldn't be sold off formed a sizable portion of Jamaica's debt burden to this day. The final maturity of some FINSAC related bonds is expected to be about 2027. FINSAC ceased operations in July 2022, and since then, Jamaica has significantly strengthened its financial regulations, lowered interest rates, and reduced the national debt, creating a more stable platform for economic growth. What I learned from this is that what crashes an economy isn't just one bad move. It's a chain of decisions that look good on paper, but they play out like horror stories in real life. For me, it isn't fair to blame the fallout on a single person or even a single government. Jamaica found itself in economic turmoil, and the systems put in place to rescue it ended up being what drowned it. With that being said, may Jamaica never repeat the errors of the past. If this helped clear things up for you, drop a comment in the comment section. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves to talk money or wants to better understand a bit more of Jamaica's economic history. I'll see you in the next one.